There's going to be laggards who step back and they say, well, we'll see what happens in the election. This will change just like other things will change if this administration gets moved out. But as we've talked before, the 21st Century Cures is bipartisan. And a lot of the work that's going on at ONC and HHS is just a continuation of work over decades. I mean, it's really been kind of consistent of moving in this direction. So the laggard doesn't get to sit back and say, this isn't moving forward. This is pretty solid. What would you say to those guys?
Yeah, look, the American public is unhappy would be an understatement with American healthcare. It screams out for transparency. It will happen one way or the other, no matter what the party is. The Cures Act rule is quite bipartisan. The Cures Act itself was voted almost unanimously. The work on information blocking was done in the prior administration. The law writing was done, with the work of a prior administration in both parties. As I think folks are quite aware, the president is extremely interested in having Americans being able to shop and control their health care. It is a center point of all of the executive orders, of all of the policy making, as well as creating markets and things like drugs to, have things to shop for. And frankly, I believe that will, that search for transparency is global. It is part of the age we live in. Maybe there's too much transparency sometimes, in social media, but it is a global phenomena. And I think people have to, providers, payers, economic parties here are going to have to, if they're working as most folks are on somewhat or highly non-transparent business models, they're going to have to really start thinking about what does my world look like when people can shop with information and control their destinies. What is going to be the mix of products? What's the mix of services? What's the mix of prices? I think it is, it has been dammed up for 55 years since Medicare started setting administrative prices, and arguably going back to 1942's Stabilization Act that made healthcare pre-tax. So we have had non-market prices now for pretty much everybody's adult lifetime, and pretty much everybody's entire lifetime if you go back to 1942. If we get market forces into healthcare, that will, unleash something truly amazing. It'll be great for the country because it'll make us more efficient and competitive. It'll allow real wage growth. Obviously, for those of us who are in the healthcare space, I think we're going to have to rethink some of our embedded assumptions.
Yeah. And with this show, I will post a bunch of links underneath. I think a lot of health systems are going to start doing their gap analysis they should have started 6 months ago because the writing was on the wall.
Well, if I can say one thing there, we have tried to make this rule from a provider point of view and even from a developer point of view be actually a very straightforward thing. I mean, if you think about, I know there's a lot of back and forth about all kinds of things, but ultimately what is required here? What is required here is a database driver on whatever format you have as a database hooked up to a server endpoint, if you will, which obviously the EHR providers will presumably provide, though others could arguably provide it. And so you as a provider obviously have to maintain that endpoint and the IP address on the internet, but you're basically hooking up a server to the internet in terms of costs. This is something that I think is quite doable from a hassle point of view. This is not one of these things where we're touching 1,000 pieces of the system, frankly, like some of the things in meaningful use work where, all kinds of behaviors have to change. Behaviors will change here, but they'll change because of market economics. They're not going to change because of, the rule says you have to change your behavior. You'll want to change because, there's that accountability.